Tony in Swansea, hi.
Hey, how are you?
So are you happy with Queen Camilla?
Not at all happy with it at all. She's an adulteress, and
Wow.
they had sex during Charles's marriage with Diana. They had it afterwards. He's the governor of the Church of England and should have more respect for us.
But then I suppose it says in the Bible the flesh is weak.
Well, I can't have respect for her. I mean, I just think of her as the king's wife, and I think that's a sufficient title. In fact, the king's second wife. And like one of your previous callers said, I'm very aware of the way in which Diana was pushed to the side and died, and that's what I think of. And the two of them should really be ashamed of themselves. Okay. Charlie has always tried to say that he wants his new wife to be a queen, but I think nearly everybody I know disagrees with it. I don't know anyone in this area.
All the callers have said what you said, Tony. Thank you very much. So, gosh, that's the whole secret of people saying, I almost hope Camilla's not watching. We're going to move on now. After the break, Stormwater.
On the Jeremy Vine show, and honestly, on the surface, the producers had teed up what looked like a routine debate. The segment was titled, Right to Call Camilla Queen, a question that sounded more like a polite formality than a genuine invitation to public discourse. Camilla was being called Queen, not Queen Consort, and her face was already printed beside Charles's on souvenirs, tea towels, and glossy magazine covers. The machinery had been set in motion. Royal commentators had parroted the palace line for weeks. Public figures had lined up to issue statements of support. It felt to some like the whole thing had been rubber-stamped by tradition and sealed with gold leaf. The only thing left, it seemed, was for the public to fall in line. But what unfolded live on air wasn't a choreographed exchange of royal etiquette. It wasn't a hushed agreement or a courteous nod. It was a revolt, a surge of honesty, a collective rupture in the polite facade. It all began with one voice, a male caller, calm but fiery, composed but unyielding, who cut through the noise with a moral precision that stopped everyone in their tracks. He didn't stammer, he didn't soften his message. He said what many have whispered privately for years, but few have dared say on national television. Charles and Camilla should be ashamed of themselves. This wasn't a moment of casual royal critique. This was, a moral indictment. This man didn't fumble through his words or hide behind qualifiers. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had waited a long time for the public to catch up with the truth he already knew. He didn't get lost in the weeds of protocol or constitutional legality. No, he went straight to the heart of the matter. They committed adultery, while Diana was still married, while the public was being sold a fairy tale, while the crown protected Charles and vilified the young woman it had dragged into its archaic traditions. That male caller wasn't interested in spin. He was interested in integrity. And for him, and for millions who still carry the ache of Diana's betrayal, the idea of Camilla being crowned queen wasn't just uncomfortable. It was, honestly, deeply offensive. It was as though the crown had become the final insult in a long and brutal story of betrayal, humiliation, and erasure. You could feel the atmosphere shift in the studio. Jeremy Vine, usually confident in guiding heated discussions, seemed caught off guard. Maybe he expected one or two tepid objections, some nostalgic nods to Diana's memory, but not this. Not this raw, unmoved conviction. Not this rejection of the official narrative. And yet, as the show continued, it became clear. This caller wasn't an outlier. Caller after caller rang in, not just to echo his sentiment, but to amplify it. They didn't speak with venom, but with clarity. They didn't yell, they told the truth. They remembered what the palace wanted them to forget. And the truth, when spoken that plainly, had more weight than any crown or coronation ceremony ever could. Because, let's be clear, this was never just about adultery in the tabloid sense. It was about betrayal at the highest level of an institution that demands moral uprightness, loyalty, and public trust. Diana entered the royal family as a teenage girl, naive, hopeful, believing she was about to step into the storybook dream that every little girl had once imagined. But from the start, the deck was stacked against her. Camilla never left the picture. Charles never gave Diana a real chance. She wasn't marrying a man. She was walking into a triangle with two people already emotionally bound to each other. And the palace knew. The family knew. The courtiers knew. But instead of protecting Diana, they used her. Instead of honoring her youth, they exploited it. And when she began to push back, to cry out, to break under the pressure, they turned against her. They painted her unstable. They called her difficult. And they watched her fall apart while Charles and Camilla carried on behind closed doors, shielded by the very institution that had thrown Diana to the wolves. That's what made the rebranding of Camilla so galling. The media campaign didn't just paint her as a harmless woman trying to live her life. They painted her as a quiet hero, as a victim of circumstance, as a true love who had been tragically separated from her soulmate by royal rigidity. But the public isn't stupid. They saw the headlines, they heard the tapes. They watched Diana cry in interviews and walk into rooms alone, while Charles was somewhere whispering into a phone about wanting to live inside Camilla's trousers. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was a slow-motion train wreck, and Diana was the only one bleeding. So when the palace elevated Camilla to the role of queen, it didn't feel like a promotion. It felt like a mockery. And yet, through it all, Charles never faced any real consequences. He remarried. He was welcomed back into public favor with the help of carefully managed press tours and, honestly, a lot of staged compassion. He was painted as the aging prince who'd finally found peace. Camilla was dubbed a stabilizing presence. And gradually, through repetition and silence, the royal family attempted to convince the public that this had always been inevitable, that Diana was, well, just a youthful mistake, that Camilla was his true love all along. But try as they might, they couldn't rewrite the past in the hearts of those who had lived through it, especially not the generation who watched Diana's life and death play out right in front of their eyes. So when the Jeremy Vine segment aired, it wasn't just a conversation. It was a reckoning. It was, honestly, like a communal purge of years of bottled-up resentment and historical revisionism. The public, especially the older generation, had really reached their limit. They didn't want to be told how to feel. They didn't want to be fed royal talking points. What they wanted was to say out loud what the headlines refused to print. You do not get to betray a woman in front of the world and then place the other woman on the throne. You do not get to humiliate the people's princess and then expect the people to stand and cheer for her replacement. The monarchy likes to rely on the idea of duty, sacrifice, and moral leadership. But where was that duty when Diana was suffering? Where was that sacrifice when Charles was sneaking around with Camilla? And where was that moral leadership when they used Diana's vulnerabilities as weapons against her? And where was the accountability when she died? Young, chased by paparazzi, hounded by a press that had been fed stories from inside the palace itself. And let's talk about how the monarchy responded to Diana's death. Or rather, how they didn't. The Queen remained silent. The flags didn't lower. There was no official mourning. The public was enraged. It was only when the people demanded a response, when the pressure became unbearable, that the palace relented. That was not grace. That was damage control. And, that's the difference between Diana and the institution that buried her. She led with heart. They lead with calculation. Now here we are, decades later, and the same palace expects us to embrace Camilla as queen, to rewrite the narrative in real time, to place a woman who was once a symbol of betrayal into the most symbolic role of female sovereignty in the country. The Jeremy Vine callers weren't having it, and neither are we. That male caller spoke not just for himself, but for the millions who never stopped seeing Diana as the woman who gave everything to a crown that never truly wanted her. What makes this all even more poignant is the way Diana's legacy continues to outshine everything the palace has tried to construct in her absence. Her humanitarian work, her emotional accessibility, her defiance of tradition, all of it continues to resonate, especially with younger generations who never even saw her alive. Meanwhile, Camilla remains stiff, distant, and, well, vaguely ceremonial. She doesn't inspire, she simply occupies. She is present but not beloved. And honestly, no amount of royal titles will change that. So, let's end with what that Jeremy Vine moment really meant. It wasn't just a caller expressing frustration. It was a national refusal to forget. It was a declaration that betrayal, no matter how old, does not fade with time, that crowns do not absolve character. The public may not hold the power to dethrone, but they hold the power to remember. And sometimes memory is the most powerful form of justice we have.